Israelis were united in their shock, grief and anger following the October 7 attacks. There was a collective demand for a tough response. But 21 months on, is that unity fracturing? Opinion polls show domestic support for the war waning. Israel's allies are losing patience, and the end goal seems more opaque than ever. On this special all-Israeli panel, we ask, is the war in Gaza dividing Israel? You're watching CounterPoints with me, Melinda Nusafora. The Israeli government says it's pushing ahead with its war goals. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu remains confident of total victory. But what does that look like? And when will it be achieved? More and more every day, Israelis are asking those same questions.
Netanyahu, don't let the talks collapse. Give full mandate to the negotiation team to end the war.
Mr. President, sir, we are counting on you. You brought back hostages before. Please do it again. We need your strength. We need your leadership.
A recent poll by Israel's Channel 12 TV network found that 74% of Israelis want the war to end and the hostages return. Some who previously supported the war are growing increasingly concerned with how it's being fought. A small but growing number of reserve soldiers are even refusing their compulsory duty to serve in the military. On the international stage, the chorus of condemnation is growing too.
But I firmly believe the Israeli government's action are doing untold damage to Israel's standing in the world and undermining Israel's long-term security.
I appeal to the international community to observe humanitarian law and respect the obligation to protect civilians.
What we are watching on the other side of the world is indefensible. The hostages still need to be released, but the war needs to end.
But those views aren't universal. Many Israelis still support the war and accuse those who don't of putting them and their nation at even greater risk.
People in Israel need to let Bibi just do his job, because so far he's doing a great job.
Any hostage deal will be detrimental to the ultimate victory in the war, and any release of terrorists that would have to come along with that is just an incentive for further hostage taking on behalf of the Arabs.
In the coming weeks, we'll bring you a dedicated Palestinian perspective, but on this special all-Israeli panel, we want to focus on how Israel is grappling with the criticism and division. We'll ask, is a split forming in Israel between those who do and don't support the war? How do Israelis feel about mounting international criticism, including accusations of genocide? And how do they think this war will end? Stay with us on CounterPoints. Joining us for our special all-Israeli panel to discuss the war in Gaza and its implications, Asher Fredman is joining us, Executive Director of the Miskev Institute for National Security and Zionist Strategy. Itamar Greenberg is a 19-year-old activist who served almost 200 days in an Israeli military prison for refusing to serve in the IDF. And rounding out our panel, Gershon Baskin, the co-director of the Alliance for Two States and a former Israeli hostage negotiator. Gentlemen, welcome to CounterPoints and thanks for being with us. I want to start our discussion on the political turmoil and divisions that appear to be growing in Israel. There are a lot of factors feeding into this, including weariness with the way the war has been fought thus far and accusations that there's no end in sight. Hostages remain in Gaza amongst the destruction, the bombardment and the starvation. Many people, including some guests on this show, have said there are no clear political objectives. We're even hearing reports of the IDF having to draw down reserve deployments by 30% because of a drop in turnout from soldiers and soaring fatigue. So, Asher, let me start with you to kick off tonight's debate. Has this war ultimately divided Israel rather than uniting it?
Thank you. Good evening. Thank you for having me. We are now facing a very complex dilemma. On the one hand, all Israelis want to see the hostages back. On the other hand, all Israelis agree that Hamas should not remain the dominant power in Gaza, capable of carrying out another October 7th attack. Now, the Israeli discourse has led to a divide over this question of ending the war, where the goal of getting the hostages back is obvious. What is much less discussed is that if the war ends tomorrow, if the IDF does indeed pull back, Hamas will quickly retake the Gaza Strip. It doesn't matter what kind of technocratic government is there. Hamas will be the dominant power on the ground, and we will see another devastating round of fighting in the near future, more terror attacks, perhaps more kidnappings. So we all want to get to a day after Hamas. We all want to see the hostages home, but it's a question of how you do that. And that has indeed created a debate within Israeli society.
What's your take on it, Asher? I mean, Hamas's its leadership has been all but destroyed. Do you think that there is a risk of Hamas being able to retake if the war was to end tomorrow?
It's not a risk, it's a certainty. Hamas does not have and this is a very, very important point. Hamas does not have the ability to carry out a large-scale attack against Israel. It still is the dominant force on the ground in the Gaza Strip, except for in very small areas that Israel controls entirely together with local actors. It has thousands of fighters, explosives, dozens, if not hundreds of tunnels still left. Absolutely. Tomorrow, Israel pulls out. Maybe you have some kind of technocratic government in charge of the garbage collection in Gaza. Hamas remains the dominant power. Hamas, as it always has, makes use of all humanitarian aid, all reconstruction materials to rebuild its military capabilities. And again, it's a great idea, right? We end the war, everybody comes home, the hostages come home. It's a lovely idea. What it means in practice is that we are in another devastating war 6 months from now. If we want to get to a day after, it must be a day after Hamas.
Itamar, what's your take on this? You know, you have real skin in the game, so to speak. You are willing to go to prison to not serve. Do you think that the Israeli community is feeling divided over this issue?
Yeah, I think when Asher say that we will be if we will end the war now, we will be in another war 6 months from now. It's exactly the point. I think the point is that we can't, you can't win the idea of Hamas by military power. You can't silence Hamas by military power and destroy it. And obviously, I don't think Israel care about that. Hamas will take again the control on Gaza because they care about the Palestinians. It's the first time that I hear that, and I live in the Israeli society. And Israel continues the war anyway, not because they care about Hamas will take control back on the Gaza Strip because of the Palestinians. Israel afraid from Hamas, as we can see, their acts as October 7th, it's immoral acts, and we need to be against it, of course. But to fight with it in military power, it will not end it anyway.
Gershon, how do you see the division? Is it palpable? Do you think there is a division on the ground, or is this something that the media is latching onto that perhaps you're not witnessing in reality?
Look, up to 80% of the Israeli public, probably more now, want this war to end, are willing to end the war to bring the hostages home. Very few Israelis actually believe that there are no innocent people in Gaza. The majority of Israelis, like Asher, believe that Hamas is still a big threat, that if we leave Gaza, Hamas will just reorganize and threaten Israel again. Let's face it, If Israel had defended its border on October 7th wouldn't have happened. October 7th happened because the Israeli army was absent. It was not fulfilling its role of protecting its citizens and protecting its border. Today, Hamas is decimated. They have no military command left. There are third, fourth tier rank officers left. There are no political leaders left of Hamas on the ground. Many Hamas people who are holding guns today are saying that they need to hold their guns to protect themselves against the Gazan population because Hamas has zero support in Gaza today. Or not zero, 5% of Gazans support Hamas today. They want Hamas gone. The last point is that the Gazans, the Palestinian people, know that as long as Hamas is in control of Gaza, there won't be a single dollar of money entering to Gaza to rebuild Gaza, and Gaza is destroyed. Israel has destroyed a civilization in Gaza. We have erased infrastructure, homes. More than 2 million people are homeless. No water, no electricity, no schools, no universities. We have committed war crimes in Gaza, and even if a majority of Israelis have trouble saying that, that reality will not escape us. It will follow us and chase us around the world for many years to come.
Itamar, I just want to come back to you on something that Gershon just said, that if the Israeli military was doing its job, October 7 wouldn't have happened, that IDF neglect on the border is what caused this. What do you make of that as someone who chose not to serve? Is that sending the wrong message about the Israeli military? Is it sending the wrong message about the way Israel is defending its borders?
Well, I don't think that the main part, or even a little bit of the job that the IDF do, is protecting. You can see it even before the genocide in Gaza, in West Bank, and not only. Always war everywhere. And I don't think that to ask me about you are not joining for defense your country or something like that. The IDF is not protecting anything, just making more troubles for Jews and Palestinians mainly. Yeah, that's it.
Asher, what do you make of...
I'm the only panelist here who is serving in the IDF. Itamar, I'm double your age. I can tell you absolutely that when we were in Lebanon, when we were in other areas, and we found rockets ready to fire on Israeli cities, we were absolutely saving lives. Gershon, I respect your, I've been following your career for many years, and I respect your intentions. But as you know, you've also spent many years reflecting, bringing Hamas's positions and views to the Israeli leadership. Your friend Razi Hamad, who you portrayed as a peace partner, is now become a main spokesperson for Hamas. I want to make one thing clear, is that Israel has never claimed that it's supposed to destroy Hamas as an idea, because you can't. You can't destroy the Muslim Brotherhood as an idea. You can absolutely destroy Hamas as the dominant governing and military force in Gaza. Unfortunately, the IDF, it's been a very difficult battle. Hamas has nearly every home, mosque, school has been used to store weapons, as appears for. I mean, these are what the soldiers on the ground are saying, not what the talking points of the talking heads are saying. And so therefore, it's been a very difficult battle, no doubt. Israel can and should have defeated Hamas as the dominant power. We've seen that those who have protested Hamas in areas where the IDF isn't present are quickly have their legs shot or are murdered, because Hamas is able to maintain its reign of terror over the Gazan population. And again, the only way to get to a better tomorrow for Gazans, for Israelis, is to end the rule of Hamas. And these ideas that a consortium of Arab countries will just take over for us and do the job for us, or Hamas will willingly give up its weapons and go on vacation somewhere, is just totally baseless.
Gershon, your reaction?
Yeah, I think I'm frozen, but can you hear me?
We can absolutely hear you. Yes, sir, we can.
Okay, good, because my picture is frozen. Hamas is destroyed. We can keep saying that we need to destroy Hamas, but actually what we're doing is we're protecting the government of Benjamin Netanyahu. This is no longer a war about destroying Hamas. Hamas is destroyed, and the Arab states and the international community won't do the rest of the job. There needs to be a political solution here, and it needs to be a political solution based on the Palestinians. This is one of the failures that we're facing right now, is that Israel can justify not ending the war because there is no viable alternative for Hamas on the ground. This is the fault primarily of the Palestinian Authority, but it's also by design by the State of Israel that has not fostered or allowed any kind of alternative to Hamas to be developed. There's only a political end to Hamas. There is no military end to Hamas. And what we Israelis have to understand, and Itamar certainly knows this, that as long as there are Israeli soldiers left in Gaza, Hamas has targets to kill. But if there are no Israeli soldiers left in Gaza, and there is a new Palestinian government supported by the Arab states with peacekeeping troops and international aid coming in to Gaza, we have an entirely different reality.
Okay, Itamar, let me come to you. We're going to be moving on to day after political solutions a little bit later in our discussion, but let me stay focused on what's happening now and today. Itamar, how do you think the Netanyahu administration has handled this war, and what sort of sense are you getting today from people in Israel about their sentiment around the government?
Yeah, I think that the big problem with this war is that it started. So we can see from the start that it will take thousands, 10,000. Now it's almost 100K people that we murdered. But we can saw it from the start, and I don't think the problem is how we handle it now. But I think that the Israeli society start to see it in the last few months. That this war is meaningless, and we can't continue with this forever. And people just want this to end as soon as possible, mainly because the hostages and the soldiers' lives. For me, obviously, the main part is that I just don't support genocide and killing of civilians. But there is no bad reasons for opposing war. So yeah, I think almost maybe 70% of the Israeli society support the hostage deal and the war.
Asher, what do you think? How do you think the administration has handled the war? And do you think that there is division within the society about the Prime Minister?
Well, there's certainly division about the Prime Minister, but that's a reflection of the fact that we are a very vibrant democracy. I have to say, from my understanding, my analysis, Itamar's presentation is incorrect, because the political opposition, which is calling to end the war, leaders like Benny Gantz or others, what they're saying is they're not saying we have to, and by the way, you can throw out the word genocide as many times as you want. It doesn't actually make it a fact. There is no genocide in Gaza. But regardless, what their political leaders are saying is we have to end the war to get the hostages back. And certainly many, many Israelis desperately want our 50 hostages back as soon as possible. And then what they say is, and afterwards, Hamas will give us an excuse to go back in and really defeat Hamas. Now, those polls that Gershon cited earlier, when they say, do you want to end the war and get the hostages or continue the war? Then, in fact, about 80% say they want to end the war and get the hostages. When the question is put somewhat differently, there was a poll that just came out today, I believe, that says, if we make a deal now, Hamas will retake control of the Strip and carry out further attacks. Do you want to end the war? The percentages are almost the opposite. So a lot of it is about, as polls are, how you phrase the question. I think that Israeli society, many Israelis believe that it's worth it to end the war in order to get the hostages back. And you know what? They may be correct. It may be that that's the moral strategic decision, but we shouldn't be blind to the fact that this will only lead to further destruction, further war. And given that Hamas continues to be deeply embedded, that destruction, again, the fact that houses are destroyed, the fact that schools are destroyed is not an indication of genocide. It's an indication of the fact that Hamas uses those locations for its military purposes.
You raise genocide, and so let me move on to our second segment, which is focusing on how the international community is perceiving the conflict, because that does bring this accusation of genocide to the fore. There has been a clear change in rhetoric from traditional Israeli allies as the conflict has progressed. President Trump didn't stop in Israel during his Middle East tour in May. The UK, France and Canada have threatened sanctions against Israel. The country is accused of genocide at the International Court of Justice, and an arrest warrant has been issued for the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on war crimes allegations. And on Wednesday, the World Health Organization chief also accused Israel of a man-made mass starvation crisis in Gaza. So Gershon, let's start with you in this segment. How do the accusations of genocide, of starvation, make you feel as an Israeli? Has this ever happened before in Israeli history when you reflect on the way the international community, some parts of the international community, perceive your country?
Listen, I experience physical pain when I talk about Israeli war crimes and the act of genocide being committed in Gaza. It pains me physically to have to say that, but that's true. And even if Asher wants to deny it, like most Israelis want to deny it, we are not exposed in Israel to the reality of Gaza. We see physical destruction. We see almost nothing of the humanitarian disaster. We've seen nothing of the erasure of a civilization in Gaza, which is the definition of genocide. It's not the Holocaust. It is not what the Nazis did to the Jews and other peoples in World War II, but there is a legal definition of what genocide is. There's an international convention that was written by the international community after the Holocaust and because of the Holocaust. And it pains me to say that what's happening in Gaza today is a genocide. Now, I just want to weigh in on one other issue with regard to the international community, because Asher talks about the impending war that will happen at the end of this war, but we almost might have a very different scenario, because the world today is convinced more than ever that this needs to be the last Israeli-Palestinian war, and the two-state solution, which was off the table for many years, is back now with the Saudi Franco initiative, with the Global Alliance for the implementation of the two-state solution that more than 90 countries are participating in. The foreign ministers of Saudi Arabia and France will be meeting in New York at the end of this month, preparing the summit for September, to push the international community to take action to implement the two-state solution. That means recognizing the state of Palestine and creating a reality which is going to enable us, the Israeli people, to change our government, which is badly needed.
Asher, what do you think? I mean, whether or not you agree or disagree with the designation or the accusation of genocide, how do you feel that some of Israel's traditional allies are levelling that accusation against Israel?
I have to use the line that facts don't care about your feelings. There's never been a military conflict where one opposing side delivered this amount of food and aid and fuel to the other side, in fact, to the side that is firing with them. By the way, we could have ended this war within 1 month if Israel had not. Hamas needs fuel to remain in its tunnels. If Israel had stopped giving fuel to Hamas at the beginning of the war, Hamas fighters would have had to come out of their tunnels. They could have been eliminated, and that would have ended the war. Now, various NGOs, international bodies have been accusing Israel of genocide every year, twice, and every day that ends with a Y. So there's really nothing new about the accusations. In fact, there's nothing new about the UK or France even taking steps against Israel while these wars take place. Now,
it is kind of new, to be honest.
The war's been going on for 2 years. There is international lack of patience. And in Israeli society, too, there's a lack of patience. Israelis don't like war. Israelis are not, I'm not happy that I have to serve time and time again on the front lines. None of my friends, my wife certainly is not happy about that. Israelis don't want to continue on war. And nobody likes being accused of genocide. But the fact that these claims are thrown out in order to create an emotional effect, but that I disagree with you, Gershon, they in no way meet the legal or factual international definition of genocide, I think is pretty clear. And it doesn't matter what what a conference held by the French says. The idea, we know, according to the best available Palestinian polling, Hamas is the most popular party in the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank. The idea of a two-state solution is nice in theory, but the idea that we could now give the Palestinian Authority control over the hilltops, overlooking Tel Aviv, overlooking Ben Gurion Airport, when the most likely outcome is that Hamas takes over the Palestinian Authority, or that other terror groups become the dominant force in the Palestinian Authority, is the reality that we have to face.
Itamar, what's your reaction to this? The idea that there are portions of the international community laying pretty harsh judgment at the feet of Israel. As someone from a younger generation, is this something that you think that maybe you will be wearing as a sign of being an Israeli for years to come?
I have to say, it's not really matter if I like it or not. I'm Israeli and I live in the Israeli society. I live here and I have to deal with that. I don't think that the international community putting enough pressure on Israel. I think if the world really wanted Israel to end it, so it was already behind us. You can see it is with the war with Iran, when Trump can end like World War almost after 12 days, and if he can do it after 12 days, he can do it to not start. And I want to say to Asher, he said that he's double of my age. I don't think it's legitimate even to get into it. I don't think it's matter to. But I will say that. Sorry, I have.
Oh, we seem to have lost Itamar's audio again.
I just want to say to Asher, yeah, you are double of my age. You know better English than me, but you are supporting a terrorist organization that murdered 100,000 people in less than 2 years. And now the
I just put it, even Hamas doesn't say it's 100,000. So you might want to check with Hamas for the updated numbers, which I think they say are 58,000.
Just one moment, Asher. We'll just let Itamar finish.
Let me finish, please. There is it's a specific counting of only people that bodies that go to the hospital, and they didn't count the bodies under the rubbers. And you can read the research about that. It's not really the point. The starvation in Gaza got to be now in level 5. And this is extermination of people. This is genocide, and you have to handle with that.
Gershon, when you have countries like America, like the UK, who have been involved in controversial wars in the past, including Iraq, including Afghanistan, do you think it's hypocritical then that we hear their governments criticize Israel, that people from those countries are protesting against Israel, when, you know, it's not like they haven't been on the opposite side of that criticism in the past as well?
I think it's certainly hypocritical, but it also doesn't really matter to me if it's hypocritical or not. We need to end this war because this war is no good. We need to end this war because we have demonstrated a lack of humanity toward our neighbors. When this war is over, there are going to remain 7 million Israeli Jews and 7 million Palestinian Arabs living between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean Sea, and we need to confront that. We Israelis need to confront the reality that there's another people on this land who believe that they belong here, who believe that this land belongs to them. We need to ensure that they also recognize that we're here and we belong here and we will remain here. And therefore, we need to get past all of this mutual recriminations and deal with the reality of the existence of our two peoples on this land. And I think that there is massive changes happening within the Palestinian body politic, and the polls that Asher cited from before are not really relevant today. And we really need to see the changes that are happening within Palestine, both in the West Bank and in Gaza. And the Palestinians understand, they have to understand that they no longer have a viable armed struggle, even if legally, by international law, they have a legal right to resist occupation with arms. They are not going to liberate Palestine or get a free Palestinian state next to the state of Israel by killing Israelis. That's the realization that they need to come to, and we need to understand that there is no military solution to this conflict. We cannot destroy Hamas militarily. Hamas will only be destroyed politically and diplomatically.
Asher, global public opinion has shifted on Israel. According to the most recent report from the Pew Research Center, in 20 of 24 countries surveyed, around half of the adults, or more than half, had an unfavourable view of Israel. Why do you think that is? And are you concerned with that international shift in perspective?
I'll address it in 1 second. Gershon, I just want to say I agree in principle with much of what you said and the need for us to find a way to live together with the Palestinian people. I fully agree with that. And we can just how, but I just want to say that. Regarding international public opinion, it comes down to two separate issues. One issue is the issue of consistent, persistent, blatant media bias in most of the international and regional media. You go into some international Arab news channels or in Arabic language news channels, and literally every day the headline is Israel does something bad, and then any other issue, Russia, United States, tsunamis, whatever else. And again, we've had nearly all the international media takes the Hamas health ministry numbers at face value and doesn't ask hard questions. Nobody's asking, if you call in the second week of the Gaza war, there were already claims that the Palestinian population was starving. You have a Gaza Humanitarian Foundation that is bringing in tens of millions of meals, but because those meals aren't reaching Hamas, you have an international campaign against them. So that's one element. The second element is that it's absolutely true. Because Hamas is so deeply embedded in Gaza, the war has been very destructive in Gaza, and we should not in any way deny the real suffering and the destruction in Gaza. And I would never deny it because that's a fact. The question is, why is that happening? Because of Hamas being embedded, and how do you prevent that from happening again by removing Hamas? Now, am I concerned? Yes, I'm concerned. I'm very concerned about Israel's international relations and partnerships, although in many ways, Israel's partnerships and relations and investments have never been better, to be frank. But in the end of the day, when I have a critical security threat to my people, to my family, to my country, that has to come first. I can't rely on words and slogans and talk about political solutions. I need to defend my homeland and then worry about public opinion.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Itamar.
Can I just comment?
Yeah, please.
I think we're talking about critical security threat. There's no question that if there's a critical security threat that Israel needs to address, that Israel needs to deal with it. But we have to understand that as long as the Palestinians are not able to achieve independence and freedom and dignity, Israel will never have security. There is a political diplomatic linkage to the security threat, the imminent security threat to the state of Israel. I'm not talking about Iran here, I'm talking about our immediate neighbors, whether it be the Palestinians or the Jordanians or the Egyptians or the Syrians or the Lebanese, the neighborhood in which we live. Our problem is that we have managed to fail systemically with the Palestinian issue since our creation, basically. And there are opportunities to deal with that issue. We have to understand that there's an equation here between Israel's security and the freedom and dignity of Palestinians. We all will get security when there are two people living on this land who both have freedom and security and dignity. This is the recipe that we need to find the answer for, and it is not a military recipe.
Itamar, do you think that the international public opinion has swayed against Israel purely because of an alleged media bias?
I think that the world is really interested in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, if we will call it like that. I think as a person that opposing the war crimes of Israel, the crimes against humanity, it's my privilege to use it. That people all over the world care about what we are doing and our crimes, and I'm trying to use it for promoting freedom and equality for everyone between the river and the sea, for the start. I think, I think we are doing a lot of work over social media. Me too, trying to promote this like idea of to show to the world what Palestinians live with or die with. I think it's important. I think it's wonderful. I think also Asher is a part of the second side, is here to do an asbara explanation. Like he's not really presenting the most of the Israeli society. A lot of the Israeli society are fascists. Sadly, I say it. Sometimes it looks like Nazism, and he is here to explain it to the world in a logical way. So yeah, that it. We have, I think, it's part of the war. It's also online. Yeah, it's an important point.
Well, Prime Minister Netanyahu says this war will continue until Hamas is totally destroyed. And yet even the then Defence Minister Yoav Gallant has said that that wasn't possible, and that Hamas, as some of our guests here tonight have said, is an ideology and can't be wiped out. On the flip side, there are parts of the community who, as Asher has raised, have fears that any concessions to Hamas would only lay the groundwork for future attacks. Some of the Israeli far right want Palestinians to leave Gaza, and even on Wednesday, the Knesset voted in favour of a non-binding resolution calling for the annexation of the West Bank. Asher, is a two-state solution dead? And do you think the Netanyahu administration will try to push Palestinians out of Gaza?
I think we need to look behind. It's funny, every time somebody presents facts or realities, other people try to dismiss it as, oh, that's Hasbara, it can't be right. Again, we need to look at reality. Certainly, I think I would have to object to the framing that there are those who say that any concessions to Hamas will lead to disaster or something like that. No, leaving Hamas as a dominant power in Gaza as it is today, regardless of the fact that many of its political leaders, the ones who have been in touch with Gershon for many years, are no longer with us, they are still the dominant power. Regarding the two-state solution, I would like nothing more than coexistence with all of our Arab neighbors, including our Palestinian neighbors. The fact is that the Oslo process, which Gershon, I think, was proudly a part of, which brought this idea of a two-state solution. The PA has not led to that, has led only to ongoing conflict. And that's because while people here talk about freedom, dignity, they ignore the fact, for example, that Palestinian Authority schools continue to glorify terrorists, that they continue to teach that Israel will soon disappear, that they continue to pay salaries to terrorists, despite some bureaucratic sleight of hand. In fact, contacts of mine in the Gulf who served in relatively high financial positions have told me, yes, over the years before October 7th, we transferred money to the PA and we know exactly where it went. It didn't go to the Palestinian people, it went to Abbas and his sons. And I think that in the Arab world, that's fairly well recognized. The other thing we have to recall is, as you remember at the beginning of the year, terrorists took over parts of the northern West Bank, and the Palestinian Authority was incapable of retaking those towns until the IDF had to roll in and take care of the terrorists. So if the Palestinian Authority can't even control its own, several miles away from Ramallah, the idea that it should control the high ground overlooking Ben Gurion Airport, or that it could even theoretically take over Gaza, is just simply not based on reality. We need to get to a solution. We need to get to peace, but it must be a peace based on reality and not on the continuation of the illusions and false paradigms which many people in Israel bought before October 7th, and a few people still believe after October 7th.
Gershon, do you want to respond to that directly?
Yeah, I certainly do. Listen, Israel and the PLO signed 6 agreements during the so-called Oslo peace process and then went on to breach every single one of the agreements they signed. I was a supporter of the idea of Oslo, and I think the Oslo process was a very bad process, and it failed. Its failure was very clear to me in a year into the process, for many of the reasons that Asher said. The failure to deal with creating an effective Palestinian governmental authority that was responsive to the needs of the Palestinian public, the educational system that developed in Palestine that incited against Israel and against Jews. All these things are very true. I think that when we're looking toward the future, the reality is that the triangle of leadership in Israel and Palestine needs to all be gone. Both Netanyahu, both Hamas, and Abbas all need to go. Abbas runs a regime of corruption. Hamas has created a regime of destruction. And Netanyahu is systematically destroying Israel's democracy. We need new leadership in this region who have the ability to remember what went wrong, what we did wrong, what the other side did to us, but also need to have an eye open toward the future where we can build a new reality. And that new reality, the new peace process that will be established at some time in the future, has to begin with things like education and incitement. We need to build the building blocks of a foundation which will be strong enough to hold the kind of concessions that Israelis and Palestinians are going to need to make. And that includes an outward, explicit, mutual recognition of the national rights of both people to live in this land. That's something that was basically absent in the Oslo peace process. So it's very easy to throw at me that I was a supporter of Oslo. I've been a supporter of a two-state solution since I'm a teenager. And that was a long time ago, but it was not the Oslo peace process that I supported. I had many criticisms of it. And I think what we need to do is learn the lessons of why it failed and not make the same mistakes again. We will make new mistakes, but we should never make the mistakes that we made before.
And I'll just remind our viewers, we have an all-Israeli panel. We may be discussing Palestinian issues, but we are getting it from an Israel perspective, and we will, of course, bring a Palestinian perspective to our viewers in the coming days and weeks. But as I said, we have an all-Israeli focus for this evening. Itamar, I want to ask you, do you, regardless of whether you want it or don't want it, do you in reality think that after what has taken place, there can ever be peace now between Palestinians and Israelis?
I don't think we are talking about peace. I think now after almost 80 years of conflict and terror, peace is not enough. Peace deal is not enough by the leaders. We need to do a deep reconciliation process for changing it, for developing truly freedom and equality for everyone between the river and the sea. It's not that Israel's security it's coming on the Palestinians' freedom. We just can't live like that, because truly the sentence of no one is free until everyone is free, and no one is safe until everyone is safe and everyone is free. So I believe in peace. I believe in reconciliation. I don't think we have other option. I think all of us can agree on that in the end we have to live here together, because here is millions of Palestinians and millions of Israelis here, and no one will live. This is the reality that we live in, and obviously I think everyone here in this panel can agree that we need to get to peace. I think that the idea of peace by strength or peace by agreements of money and everything that Asher is trying to do, as I see, I think it's also important to have peace with Saudi, but I think it's meaningless to develop it and try to do it now while with the people that live in the same place that we came and just got into the land. They are here now with us. We can't live together, and we are always in the bloodshed. I think it's impossible to work if it's all the world about peace when we are here in just endless war.
Asher, what do you make of the non-binding Knesset vote from Wednesday evening on annexing the West Bank? Do you think it's going to make the situation better or worse?
I don't think it's going to have any practical impact on the situation. I think it reflects an Israeli awakening to the reality that we face. Again, the idea that as Gershon mentioned, and Gershon, again, I really respect your perspective and your work, but the fact that the Palestinian Authority continues to be incite to terror, to pay for terror, to corrupt, to be ineffective, to its basic inability to stop terror has made it clear to Israelis the fact that Iran is looking to bring in Islamist militias into Jordan to undermine Jordan and then to attack Israel from Jordan. On the first day of the Iranian operation, I didn't refuse to serve my country. I got a message saying, be ready to prepare to report to the Jordanian border because there's a real fear that Iranian militias or Muslim Brotherhood terrorists may be coming across that border. So I think what the decision reflects is an Israeli understanding or an Israeli consensus or growing consensus that the strategic areas in Judea and Samaria, in the West Bank, in the Jordan Valley, will need to remain under Israeli control. Now, I can foresee a future where, with people-to-people peace building, with mutually beneficial cooperation, with de-radicalization, with demilitarization, that sentiment could change, and we could potentially take the steps towards a better future between us and the Palestinians. But I think the Knesset vote absolutely reflects people looking reality straight in the face and saying, what do we need to do in order to ensure that we don't have the same terrorists that were rolling into southern Israel aren't rolling into Tel Aviv tomorrow? Because I hate to break it to you, but that's a real possibility.
Well, I think if we're going to deal with reality, then we have to understand the reality of the region that we're living in. And the surest way to strengthen the extremists, the Islamists, the Hamas, and other groups in the region is by doing things like threatening to annex the West Bank or parts of the West Bank. If you want to bring down the regime in Jordan, this is the fastest way to do it. If you want to risk the peace treaty between Israel and Jordan and Israel and Egypt and Israel and the Emirates and Bahrain, and if you want to guarantee that there will never be any kind of normalization and peace between Israel and Saudi Arabia, go ahead and annex parts of the West Bank or all the West Bank. This is the surest way of strengthening those terrorist and extremist groups that want to destroy Israel. That is a complete lack of understanding of the reality in which we live. It is perhaps understanding the reality of the small percentage of the Israeli population who are the settlers and the settler leaders who dictate Israeli politics for many, many years already and have driven Israel off the path of sanity in regard to understanding the region that we're living in.
So I just want to point out, there's been a lot of complaints about Netanyahu, and you can like him, you can dislike him, but the fact is that Israel is a democracy, and there is an easy way to change the leadership, which is by election.
Not so
and
easy,
Netanyahu
Asher.
has won vote after
Not
vote
so
after
easy.
vote after vote. What will be in the next
Not
vote?
so easy.
No.
Since October 7th, the Israeli public wants Netanyahu gone, and we have no way of getting rid of him. And he keeps doing
Again,
things.
we're a
that the
democracy.
public
There's a
again.
democratic process.
He's
You can
demoralizing
get a
the
majority of
country.
Knesset
He's
members to
destroying
vote for no confidence. There could
independence
be a
of our
vote. There could be
judiciary.
elections
He has
for
a
3
solid
months.
majority in the Knesset. He has a solid majority in the Knesset. The Knesset is irrelevant in terms of legislation, and
Well,
they're
then
trying to
democracy
turn
is irrelevant. Maybe, let's call on France
It is
to
not
save us,
democracy.
but if you want to be democratic, you have the Knesset.
It is the dismantling of democracy that we're experiencing in Israel today by Netanyahu and his regime. This is what they are doing. They are creating an autocracy in this country. We see the way that Netanyahu controls his party, the way that he controls the government, the way that he controls the Knesset, the way that he controls our future. Our future
we
is
have parliamentary democracy with free and fair elections and the rule of law.
Really,
the fact that you don't like the outcome is certainly legitimate, but it doesn't make the Knesset or the government illegitimate.
Yeah, democracy is not defined by what the majority decides. Democracy has a lot of other elements within it that determine
is it defined by what you decide?
No, democracy is about protecting the rights of the minority, not protecting the rights of the majority. There are rights.
There's no country in the Middle East where the rights of minorities are protected more than in the state of Israel.
Okay. Itamar, jump in here and give us your perspective on this. The situation of the Knesset vote annexing the West Bank, is there a concern to you that it will exacerbate the situation? Will it calm the situation? What's your take? And maybe to comment on what Gershon and Asher have been debating there.
Yeah, I have to say in the start, we don't live in a democracy. Democracy is where everyone has their rights. Firstly, obviously, you can say that Israel is democracy when we control millions of people without the rights to vote and just basic rights, human rights. And I have to say about the West Bank, we live under the ground. There is a ongoing process of annexation for years. Okay, I work a lot in West Bank in my activism, also in what's called protective presence. We are trying to help Palestinians that are suffering from Israeli terror and settlers terror. It's both. It's actually Israeli terror because it's not that the army is not controlling it; it's part of it, and this is main part of my activism. And I don't know what Asher knows about what's happening there because Israeli news don't like to report about that. But Asher, I invite you to come with me and to see what actually terror looks like in West Bank. And you are talking about theoretically options of what will happen after we will do peace and terror in Tel Aviv, or you don't live in the reality. Reality now it's years of terror, and I don't understand what you want to talk about theoretically things that will happen because our problems now it's a lot more important. Yeah, I think it's crazy to talk about annexation.
Do you think terror in Tel Aviv and Jaffa is theoretical or something that happens regularly?
I will continue. Please let me finish and reply later. I'm just saying about the annexation and the Riviera plan of that in Gaza. That yesterday there was an event in the Israeli Knesset, MKs from the government that did an event about our plan to establish a settlement into Gaza. So I don't think you can talk about the meaning of the war, of destroying Hamas, when we see the reality and what is the real meaning of this war. Yeah, that's it.
We're almost out of time. Asher, a quick right of reply to you before we rush out.
I think that we need new thinking and new paradigms to figure out how we get to a better future, whether this idea of one Palestinian authority is the right approach, or whether working with local leaders is I know it's a very out-of-the-box approach. It's going to create a lot of reaction, but there are potentially other paths forward for creating healthy, productive, mutually respectful relations with the Palestinians, the millions of Palestinians who share the same beautiful land. And I just want to say, I think this debate, obviously we disagree, but it is a reflection of the Israeli democracy. Itamar, I dare say that I've been around the West Bank, Judea and Samaria, perhaps even more than you have. I certainly think that the small examples of violence by people in Judea and Samaria is condemnable. I think that the reality, again, is far different, but we don't have time to go into that. But I just think that this is an example of the Israeli debate taking place. So if that's the goal of the program, then you've heard a good example of that. And thank you very much for having me.
Pleasure. All right, Gershon, a final wrap up from you.
I think that the conclusion of any kind of debate like this is it's not about creating a Palestinian authority, but recognizing that the two people living on this land have the same right to the same rights. And until we understand that, both peoples, the Israelis and the Palestinians, that we all have the same right to the same rights, there will be no solution for ending this conflict. And that's what we have to try to achieve. This has to be the last Israeli-Palestinian war. We can't keep doing this to each other. What Hamas did on October 7th were horrendous crimes against humanity and war crimes, acts of terrorism. And what Israel is doing in Gaza are horrendous war crimes and crimes against humanity. It has to end. We need to help the world to do it, but we need to help ourselves first and foremost. We need to open our eyes to the reality that both peoples are living in here, and we need to put an end to it. And there are ways to do that. This is not the only conflict that it has ever been in the world, and it's certainly not the last conflict in the world, but it's our conflict, and we have a responsibility for bringing it to an end.
It's been a fascinating discussion, a purely Israeli perspective on what's happening. Of course, we will bring a purely Palestinian perspective in the very near future. But for now, thank you very much to our guests. Asher Fredman, Executive Director of the Miskiv Institute for National Security and Zionist Strategy. Itamar Greenberg, an Israeli activist who was jailed for refusing to serve in the IDF. And Gershon Baskin, the co-director of Alliance for Two States and a former Israeli hostage negotiator. Thanks for joining us on CounterPoints. And to you at home, thank you for joining us here on CounterPoints. To watch all of our latest debates and special interviews, subscribe to Al Arabiya English on YouTube, and of course follow us on X and TikTok. We'll see you next time.